Crossroads and Curses by Danielle Ackley-McPhail. Never piss off a witch. Sound advice. Not what I'd expected, but sound just the same, even for someone like me with no belief in witches. No need to smirk, human, the elven warrior grumbled. I'm pretty sure I wasn't, but didn't argue. That might piss him off, and then all this would have been for nothing. Instead, I examined him closely. If the season were closer to All Hallows' Eve, I would expect I was being had. How else to explain a 7-foot-tall, ancient-seeming warrior suddenly sprawled across a rough old bench in the middle of nowhere? Only this was Beltane by the pagan calendar, and I'd told no one what I'd intended. Over weeks and months I had gathered those items I'd felt I would need to ensure success. Not one thing I'd brought or worn had been manufactured by modern means. There was no steel or iron anywhere on me, and the burlap sack at my feet contained every protective or ritual object I could possibly need, gleaned from the collective legends of the Crossroads. 21 pennies, 3 candies, a hazel switch broom, garlic, even a battered violin, and the list went on. I hadn't needed any of them. Dude must have been bored. I would swear I'd never seen him before, yet something about him echoed familiar on a subconscious level. With a reporter's trained eye, I took mental note of his long, narrow features. His tabard, worn over a heavy tunic and worn leather leggings, bore some symbol I did not recognize, woven through with what appeared to be thread of gold. Have to admit, I coveted the boots on his feet, but I raised my eyebrow at the sheathed steel at his hip. Proof he was fake? Possibly. Possibly not. There was some debate on the issue of iron in the Fae. Other than the symbol, which I quickly sketched upon the parchment stretched across my knees, I committed his features to memory, not skilled enough with my borrowed quill to waste time and effort on secondary details. As the sharpened tip scratched across the surface, the warrior glared at me with silver-gilt eyes from beneath ebon locks that would have had any number of runway divas wanting to pull it out of jealousy. The delicate curved point of an ear poked through as well. Either this guy was the real deal, or he was a nutjob with theatrical training. Neither possibility was quite comfortable, but I'd endured worse when on a story. I pushed strands of ordinary brown hair out of the way behind my own ear, to better see by the light of the beeswax candle held in place on the bench between us by its own drippings. Surprisingly, no fragrance rose from it. And another peculiar thing. Other than the bit I'd melted to keep the whole thing standing upright, the taper hadn't burned down. The flame remained steady and bright in the surrounding darkness. The elf cleared his throat, his impatience somehow sounding elegant, dignified. It was startling, as the night was unnaturally silent, with not a trill from the night birds or chirp from a cricket. The look in his eye had grown no less intent, but had taken on a puzzled air. He almost looked put out. "But why are you here?" Here was a defunct bus stop at a country crossroad. "I want to know the truth," I answered. "The truth is a stone-cold bitch." Wow. How raw and crude, so at odds with the outward image. I was leaning a bit more toward him being a nutjob, but I had to be sure. "Let's start small," I said. "The candle, why doesn't it burn down?" "We are in midnight." My eyes darted to my wrist, seeking a watch that was not there. I've been sitting here too long for it to still be midnight. "I don't understand." "Not midnight. Midnight," he answered, as if I were slow. "Some things are immutable. When you enter a crossroads at the precise moment of midnight, you overlap the realm of midnight, a place where there is no time, no boundary, only expectation. Everywhere at once and nowhere at all." I laughed. "Okay, suspicion confirmed. Nut job." I had a feeling I was wasting my time. I should have known by now that the truth we look for isn't always the one we find. A childhood memory had led me to this place. It was old, thin, and faded, but cherished. To be expected. I was only 3 years old when it happened. My family had gone camping and I'd wandered off. I was lost, alone, and frightened. It was the middle of the night, at a crossroad that felt very much the same as where I found myself now. I'd cried for the knight from my picture book to save me, and he had come. The next morning, I woke up safe beside my mother, with the memory already fading. Like one of my fairy tales, only I'd been so sure it was real. I needed to know if it was real. Gee, which one of us was delusional again? Not wanting to think about that too hard, I fired off a question of my own. Why are you here? This time he laughed, rich and bold, and again, somehow familiar. Me? He asked. I pissed off a witch. He laughed again and I huffed out a sigh, tired of cryptic and tired of feeling like the only one who didn't get the joke. Leaving the candle where it was and setting aside the parchment and quill, I started to reach down for my bag, halting with a shiver at a change in the air. I looked up, confused, only to be thrust to the ground. The scrape of drawn steel made my gut clench and sent me rolling beneath the weathered bench before the thought was complete. I waited for the sound of steel biting wood, or worse, flesh. It did not come. I peered up through the slats, expecting to meet his crazed molten silver gaze. What I saw was elven warrior dude, faced off with some gawky SCA escapee. Pot metal against Toledo steel. It was like something out of a movie. The formal challenge, the flourished salute, the nearly choreographed engagement. Well, half of the exchange anyway. Sir Gawquin moved more like a trained bear. Plenty of enthusiasm, not much grace. Slash, jab, clanging metal, ringing steel. Grunts and sweat and sparks flew out from the center of the crossroad. The air carried the sharp aroma of blood. I flinched but could not look away, though with the evidence at eye level, part of my thoughts absently took note that still my candle did not drip, did not burn down. And then, beyond all belief, shining steel was struck from elven hand, and pot metal point came to rest upon the tabard where it met smooth, pearly skin. At the tip wailed a perfect ruby drop. "Yield!" the kid half squeaked and half growled. My mouth fell open as the elf went to his knees, head bowed. I wanted to yell, to scream, to take up the sword sticking in the ground not 2 feet away and kick the pimply geek's ass. Remember, delusional. But I could only watch with fascination as the kid's expression transformed, and boy became man. The cheap blade was lowered and a more subdued salute sketched. Then the guy walked away, bloodied but unbowed. Tension pounded a tempo against my skull. Snippets of recalled research came to mind. Hecate, Legba, vampires and ghosts and fairies. But I could scarcely reconcile them with what I'd witnessed. I closed my eyes and sought a moment of reason in the aftermath of chaos. I so wanted to believe what had transpired was a hoax, but I could not. A weight settled on the bench while I was failing to find my zen. He made no sound but for lightly labored breathing, which quickly steadied. I opened my eyes and glanced at him through the slats, finding myself closer to a bloody, gaping thigh than I cared to be. "What the hell was that?" I managed, my voice coming out thin and my breath smelling faintly of panic. "What he expected," was the weary answer. I crept out from my shelter and put a bit of distance between us. Should have paid attention. I ended up between him and his sword. A good thing? A bad thing? It could go either way. Elven warrior dude sighed, shook his head, gave me a look that said, "Come on already." Then he ran his hands across the rents in his clothing and over his angry wounds. I gasped, and my eyes went wide. If the scent of blood weren't still in my nose, I would have wondered, was I going mad? His hands began to glow, and as they passed over the damage, it faded swiftly away. "I am, and have ever been," he said, "the guardian of the four-armed Crossroads. In my prideful and foolish youth, I forgot that honor bore responsibility. Hecate has seen fit to remind me. The mortal world has been seeded with legends that I must oblige." I must have still looked confused. "You came here seeking truth?" It was a question, but not. I nodded anyway. That boy came desiring to prove himself in a fairy challenge. "This is your truth. I am perceived as all things is needed. To those who believe and enter the Crossroads, I must be whatever they seek." Again, I thought of my research and trembled. "Hardly anyone comes looking for a hero," he said, as if my thoughts were open to him. And before my eyes, the elven warrior shimmered. For only a moment, I caught a glimpse of the shining knight of my childhood, before he sketched a salute and faded gently away. Somewhere, a cricket chirped. Only then did the scent of melting beeswax finally waft on the air.